So today we're together with Manisha Snoyer. First of all, welcome to our talk.
It's so great to be here. I'm so happy that we finally had a chance to connect.
Yes. So Manisha, for the people watching, I have a little sun hat on, and we moved from cloudy Denmark to France. And
Oh, bienvenue.
I saw that you had a history with France. So if we could start there, why do you speak French?
Absolument. J'adore la France. And I think the big reason that I became a teacher is because of France. When I was younger, I dreamed of becoming an actress and I loved French films. And so in college, I decided to study at a French acting school. It was actually going to be my first hack that I like, kind of like Gerard Depardieu. I was going to break into the French scene as an American actress and then become world famous from there. So I studied for 3 years at a place called Cours Florent, an acting school. And during that time, I needed a way to make extra money. And so I started working as a private tutor and I taught a family that went to the Australian high school. I tutored another kid for an American exam. And then I just found that that was easy, best side gig for me. And when I moved back to New York, I started my first business, which was a French language school for adults. And then I just started teaching everywhere. Eventually it was 18 subjects. I became a bilingual sub for the New York City Public Education Department. And that's kind of how I got my in because they weren't taking more subs at that time. And and then on the other side, I think that being studying French at an acting school really showed me the power of experiential learning and having an emotional connection to what I was learning because my verbal skills accelerated so much more quickly in that environment than my peers who are also in the study abroad program.
Yeah. What is it about teaching? On our podcast, most often we talk about homeschooling, unschooling, self-directed learning, and traveling. But there's something, maybe it's the gift of sharing knowledge. What is it for you that makes it a thing that you have been attracted to?
Mm. Yes, so it's funny. Like many others in homeschooling, I never wanted to be a teacher. It seemed like such an icky job. And my mother was a teacher, so I thought that's the last thing I'll ever do. And I guess I think that I see teaching as a very receptive art rather than an active art if you're doing it well. And when I was a tutor, I was kind of called in when the wealthiest, most affluent families had a problem with what their exceptional private school was doing, right? So I was there to target like the worst problem that a student was facing. And the more I taught, the more it really became the art of saying, I don't know, what do you think? And having the student teach me back and learn themselves and then explain it to me and occasionally pausing or asking a question. And so I feel like, with Modulo, we have tutors, but they're really more like learning coaches that are there to support children through their own learning. So I think the highest form of teaching is really just to be able to build a secure attachment with a child and help give them the confidence that they have the internal tools to find out what they need to know.
That sounds very much like parenting when you're an unschooler.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it does sound a lot like parenting. And I always, Modulo developed a tutoring program because people asked for it. And I basically have this philosophy that if a parent feels like something is a good path for their kid, then I will do that. But it wasn't actually my idea to start a tutoring program. And so I feel like, what I hope parents will understand is that they do have the capacity to support their children's own learning. Sometimes as a parent, it can be a little bit, you might need more trouble stepping back because it can feel very scary to kind of let go of your child's learning in a way. And sometimes a mentor or a peer is better prepared to do that. I find that some of our best tutors are really high school students because they've been through it recently and they can kind of help kids get where they need to go. But yeah, I do think that every parent has the capacity to teach their child better than I do.
I think we're skipping a little bit here. So you're talking about it. Just, I've been looking briefly, but maybe the listeners have never heard about you or your project. So now we're talking about your tutoring
Yes.
thing. And we were just in France studying acting. So maybe you should
Oh,
just
amazing.
it went pretty fast. So maybe you should say a little more about what it is that you're doing with
Oh,
Modulo?
Modulo, yes, absolutely. And so Modulo is a marketplace for modular learning. And when I talk about modular learning, I'm referring to the kind of homeschooling that's curating your child's education through a combination of learning experiences, social experiences, self-directed learning, could be co-op, could be online school, but it's a very highly curated, customized process. And our platform is there to help parents find the right tools for their unique child. I have nothing against doing nothing. I think unschooling can just pure unschooling, letting your child go to a library and explore books or watch videos. I love that. But sometimes parents feel like they need some tools, and it's really the Wild West out there. I mean, every kind of person is developing curriculum and apps, and it's just really hard as a parent to sort through it all. And what I've found is that when children find tools that they really love, it makes everything else happen so much more easily. So we've gone through and just vetted, basically my process has been to kind of scour online parenting forums and see what people are saying about different tools relative to different types of children, and then make it so anybody can find the right tools for their child.
So I had to make a note when you said I don't have anything against doing nothing, just to clear
Yes.
It's not
Into
against
that
you,
one.
but I have a lot of listeners who unschool and a lot of listeners who want to unschool. And I just want to clarify that unschooling is very much not doing nothing.
Oh, absolutely.
Doing
Absolutely.
nothing is not what we do. And it's not what unschooled children do. And I know that you don't think so either.
Yes, thank
But
you
we
so much
have,
for highlighting that. Yes, because as I was saying it, I realized how that could kind of come across the wrong way. Because, and what I mean to say is that, like, there is a spectrum. Even within unschooling, there's a huge spectrum of how much you as a parent want to be involved in your child's learning process and how much feels right with your family. And so a really beautiful and powerful way to learn can be to just simply allow your child to explore. It's truly extraordinary. And I love that form of education. And I'm always trying to kind of hold the hands of parents to move towards that approach, towards the real unschooling approach, given that, every single thing that's happening in a child's life impacts them, what environment they're in, what books are available to them, what art supplies are available to them. So even in a very hands-off learning experience, there's so many things that are shaping that child's experience. Now, on the other hand, we have parents at Modulo who really do want to schedule every single moment of their child's day, what tasks they want them to do, what curriculum, what tutors. And my basic philosophy is that if that is a parent's desire and they feel that's the best approach for their child, I'm going to believe in them and trust them and allow, provide what support I can for that path. And so when I said like doing nothing, I think what I was trying to really imply is like, I think that I lean more towards this side of the spectrum in terms of what I would choose, but Modulo is there to support the whole spectrum, if that makes sense.
it makes total sense. I just wanted to make sure that it was clear for whoever.
Yes, thank you for
Maybe
doing
all
that.
these concepts are new for the listener, maybe, so just to not mix things up. And I think
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
haven't checked out your platform too much. We have no personal need right now in our family, but I think a key word we should throw in here if we're, bouncing teaching versus unschooling and, how can we make sense of these things is the word voluntary. Because it's not about whether you have a tutor or not, or whether you choose to go through a high school experience, or you think, okay, maybe I want to know everything math, and now I'll find a specific course and I'll find someone to help me get through it because my parents can't help me any longer. I want to do that. And for me, being an unschooler, the key is that this idea has to, well, maybe not even the idea has to come from the child, because you're allowed, quote unquote, as a parent to come up with ideas, but the actual doing it, going through it, from my point of view, the important part is that it's voluntary. That makes it unschooling. You can go to school and still be an unschooled child if you chose to go there.
Right.
Choose to stay, and your parents every morning can tell you, oh, you can stay home if you want to. I'm not going to be school police. So yeah, I just wanted to, it's not about whether you use a platform like Modulo or not, or any other platform for learning. It's about whether the child gets to make that decision on his or her own.
Absolutely. And it's such a, I find, kind of in the role I am trying to support families, it can be a very delicate line, because you have you have parents' rights and then you have children's rights. And some of and because, not a lot, I'm running a marketplace, it's a business. The people who are paying are parents. Then unfortunately, I would like at some point in the future to be there some kind of kid cash as well. But, the people that I think I'm really called to serve are the children, but then there are also their parents. And sometimes I'll run into a situation where I feel like a parent is putting too much pressure on their child. And that's a challenge for me, right? Because who am I to say how they should parent their own child? And at the same time, I want this child to have the freedom. And so it's, that's still something that I, as a founder, am trying to navigate in my own relationship to this work. And I don't have the best answer.
It sounds like a hard one, because you're not in the business of parenting counseling, basically. That's not what you're selling. You're selling tutoring. So
well, in a way we are, because it's a marketplace for families to find different learning experiences. And a lot of what Modulo does is talking to parents and help them kind of walk through what's the next best step for them. But I think, like, even in a counseling situation, you can't really be an effective counselor if you're telling someone what to do, right? I mean, you're being a good counselor if you're answering their questions and responding to their questions. And, if the parent, as a teacher, you deal with child abuse. And that's, we're a mandated reporter, as a teacher, if you have to say something, if you see emotional or psychological abuse. But then, is it illegal to force your child to do math homework? No. Is it my job to say, don't do that, that's bad for your kid? I don't have all of the information. How am I supposed to know better than this family what's right for their child? And I need to respect their freedom as well. So it's it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing to walk that line.
It's delicate. I understand.
But you are helping people who have chosen to take so let me start another place. I presume most of the families who goes to your marketplace is from the homeschooling environment, or is there also families who want extracurricular? I don't know the percentage. How is that?
Yes, so Modulo is designed for homeschooling families, but we do have, I would say, 10 to 20% of people whose children are enrolled in traditional school. And that I've become a lot more direct with people and saying, this is not going to work the way that you want it to if you're layering it on top of school. Because when a child is homeschooling, they are able to study at the hours where they're most fresh and focused, and they're learning for the sake of learning most of the time. They're not learning for catching up with school. So if a parent comes and says, wow, like, I want all these benefits of Modulo, but I also want to send my child to school, I say, look, doing this type of work after school when your child is tired and trying to conform to a school standard, which might not be the way their brain thinks, and you don't really know what's going on in class, it's just a whole different ball game than doing modular learning. So I think probably a lot of what I try to do is just give parents confidence or help them tap into their natural confidence to pursue what they kind of already know is the right path for their kids.
What attracted you to support the homeschooling community? Have you been homeschooled yourself? It doesn't sound like it, but your mom was a teacher, so has there been a lot of family fights at home where your mom is like, why are you supporting them? Send them in school instead. That is the only right choice.
Yeah, no, my mom is, first of all, very laissez-faire. I don't think she said no to me once in my entire childhood. So that's that's probably part of my attraction to unschooling. But it's funny. I think that in a way we're kind of reverse homeschoolers because I was raised by a single mom, and she went for the first day to drop me off at daycare, and I was upset. And so she just stayed the whole year at daycare with me and never left, even though we were paying for daycare. And then she really wanted to give me a good education. And there was a private Montessori school in our hometown. And in order to afford it, she became a teacher at the school. So I was always like running into her classroom because I had this natural inclination to be near my mom. So like my mom came to school instead of me coming to home. But I think that, my experience, my attraction to homeschooling was when I was a teacher in the New York City Department of Education, and I saw these like private schools, public schools, after school, some of the best public schools, some of the considered most failing public schools. And I just was kind of appalled by what I saw. I mean, I taught in dozens of different schools to all ages, and the system was so broken. Just because you're paying $60,000 a year doesn't mean that your child is learning anything. Like the goals at that school were to prepare kids to get into Ivy League universities, and they were answering to their board, not to not to the children. And the kids were so stressed out. Parents were crying. I had children throw up because they were under so much stress. I mean, that doesn't, why? At Dalton, every kid had 4 hours of tutoring a night after school just to keep up with what was going on in the classroom. And then you go to, I taught an after school at-risk program for at-risk youth at a Title I school, which people don't know, it's schools that are performing poorly, and so they get extra funding. And that was like, I mean, I couldn't even believe what was happening. I saw a teacher hit a kid. I saw parents picking their kids up drunk. I saw kids saying, my mom said if I don't do my homework, I'm going to get beat. And the people were saying like, well, let's just see if they do beat her and then we'll do something about it. And I mean, it's just atrocious schools that just felt like prisons, just prison. Like you were in a prison, all children of color, and 1 block away was an all-white school in the same area in Brooklyn that had like organic lunch, I mean, and then in the really kind of good public school, I mean, they had received so much money from the PTA that someone embezzled $100,000 and no one noticed for 3 years. And yet in my music classroom, I didn't have a single instrument that wasn't donated by the PTA, even though that school was getting $20,000 allotment per pupil. And so it was just a mess. And so I started hearing these stories of parents who were starting homeschool co-ops. Like basically they were like, okay, public school is not working for my kid. Private school is $60,000 a year. I don't even get in when I apply. And so let's just get a group of parents together and hire a teacher. And I thought that was pretty cool. And at the same time, I was a host on Airbnb. So I kind of made the connection, sharing economy, homeschool co-ops. And I did want to start a new company at the time. And so I started talking to these homeschool co-op leaders, people like Noah Mayers, who runs Brooklyn Apple Academy in Park Slope. And I was just blown away by these homeschool co-ops. Like the kids were thriving. There was actually a child who went through our program who was his doctor said if he stayed in school, he was going to have a heart attack. He was 10 years old. And the family had to sue the state in order for him to go to a special private school in New York. And so eventually they decided to go to a homeschool co-op. And within 4 weeks, he's fine, zero anxiety, totally good. And so I just kind of thinking like, why is this so complicated? all you need is a teacher, a space, a group of kids. And I kind of thought that was a little bit naive. But then I started discovering through homeschool co-ops, I discovered homeschoolers. And that's when I was really blown away, because it was not religious people sitting at a kitchen table educating their kids 6 hours a day with no friends. It was people in tech, software engineers. It was activists, artists, really. And what was amazing too, I mean, I still remember the first day I visited Brooklyn Apple. I asked if I just been emailing, and finally they granted me a visit. And I met them at the Brooklyn Public Library. And I saw 6 kids just, there's like this staircase, and it's the thing you hold on to walk up the staircase, and they were all swinging around it like monkeys, like just crazy. And so I every part of my body wanted to tell them to stop and be safe. And I watched the teacher just let them swing around the bar like monkeys. And I realized, what is this impulse in me to contain these children's energy that is so strong? It's almost like a reflex. And that was like an incredible awakening for me. And then, from there, I just started meeting so many more cool, talented, the best children's app developer in the world, homeschooling his kids, another, all these product developers and techies and just world famous photojournalists. And that was just the beginning of my journey. And I fall more and more in love with homeschoolers ever since. And I'll just say one more thing.
I'm listening.
We are connected both to Gordon Neufeld, and I think that his book was really the kind of last piece in the puzzle for me, because I had my own question. I saw these thriving homeschooling communities, but I had some questions about, do kids need to be in a group of kids the same age? And Gordon Neufeld's book really helped me see that this idea of a peer culture being needed is false, and that what children really need to thrive is this secure attachment with their primary caregiver. And from that foundation of love and confidence, social relationships flow. And I feel like in this day and age, we are so missing true communities that share skills and resources. Is the only example I've seen of what community should be, like what true community should be, of people who share their skills, share childcare, share food and shelter with each other. If you want to travel around the world and you're an unschooler, you just say, hey, who wants to host me in Chile or Mexico? And you travel, and it's and it's these communities that are united around a shared value of education. And it doesn't always take this form. There's some homeschooling communities that are exclusive, but for the large part, people come together across politics, across religion, and they support each other because they care about their children's education. And I think that it's just an amazing thing.
That is one of the best speeches for homeschooling I've heard in a long time. Well, something I would like to try to unpack together with you was this aha moment. We sometimes call it, when we started homeschooling, or when you do, it's like opening the doors to Narnia. You're like, what is happening on this place of freedom? But I want to talk about why do you think we live in this, or have this instilled, oh, they cannot do that, they shouldn't swing on the stairs, and all these things. Because I'm 50, and I think it happened in my lifetime, that the world has gotten more scared around just letting kids be kids. It's Peter Gray also talk about the value of free play and real play. I remember my mom saying, oh, are you walking around we had like a small kind of swamp thingy, not a real swamp, a moss, I think it's called in English. And she was like, please don't go out there. And me and my brother, we of course were out playing there and fell in the water, needed to drag each other up. None of us drowned. We're still here. We had a lot of fun and learned a lot. And today people would be terrified to let their children go out and just play. So what do you think happened?
Yeah, so I guess I can speak more to the institutionalized schooling role than I can to the cultural shift in parenting. But most of us experienced institutionalized schooling. And coming from a teaching background, I can tell you that what teachers are trained to do is manage large groups of students. Because if you don't develop good behavioral management techniques, it's just going to be 30 kids yelling and bouncing around for an hour, which is what children should do. That's the natural state of childhood. Then once we get to be 30, we have to learn how to go to the gym because we're sitting too much, right? But I think, yeah, that's all I learned to do is like it's all about, the what is it, Pavlovian dog or whatever, like how do you manage behavior, and it's all, and now the literature is all positive rewards, incentives, like you train behavior through remarking on good behavior instead of punishing bad behavior, but it's still behavioral training. And so everything that we experienced as children was people managing our behavior. That's what we think of when we think of a parent or a teacher. It's people who've developed all of these techniques to get us to do, what we want them to do. And so, of course, that's all we know about being a parent or being a teacher, is that my role is to manage this child's behavior. So to become a totally different person who instead allows a child their freedom and trusts that when you allow a child their freedom, you have to go against all of your conditioning, all of your role modeling. I mean, that's basic social learning theory. Kids learn by watching adults. That's how you learn. So I think the first step is just to have some compassion for yourself. And that's all you know about being a parent, because that's all you've seen. And so what are some other examples that you can see? What are some other things you can try to get used to this new approach? For me, it happened very quickly. Once I realized, like, oh, I don't have to do that, then all of these different possibilities started emerging.
But isn't it also very contextual? I often say when I speak about unschooling that if I had to be the responsible adult around 25 9-year-olds for 7 hours, 5 days a week, I would probably invent school. It
Absolutely.
wouldn't be safe. I would need them to sit down. I would need them to pay attention to whatever I was asking them. Maybe I could do slightly better than what we see in public schools, but I would still have to have the discipline. And I think, in no human natural culture, we have organized childhood around same age peer groups of this large amount of children. It's not natural to humans, which means we've created a very artificial space, and behavior is very contextual. How we behave is based on where we are, who we are around, what we feel, how much sunlight, how hungry are we, is there a confined space, how much oxygen is in the room. There's so many factors, and we're creating a very, very artificial, weird context for children to grow up in. So in a way, it makes a lot of sense that we have to manage it because, yeah. Whereas unschooling or natural learning you can call it whatever, doesn't have to have that unschooling hat. Usually happens in a context of family life, community life, the neighbors, your friends, people you've known for a long time, and the word voluntary comes back into that equation. Your friends are someone you choose, not someone you happen to be in a classroom with. And then the job for the quote unquote teacher, that could be the parent or the neighbor or whatever, is to just create a space where learning can happen. So
Absolutely.
we don't have to plan it. We don't need the curriculum. We don't need the positive reinforcement. We don't need to push because, well, if we do trust the process, the learning will happen. If there is, you said before, you choose the art supplies, you choose with the means you have, what books are on the shelf, where do you live, how much heating do you turn on, and what times of day, and there can be many factors that are limited by other things than your your choice. It could be money, it could be health, but still you create a space and then learning can happen, should be able to happen in that space. But we're not managers. We don't need to check it, we don't need to tick it, we don't need to grade it, we don't need to push, we don't need to plan it.
Absolutely. And I love the empathy that you have for teachers in that situation, because even when you go from a dynamic of, maybe giving a math lesson to one child versus two children, the whole, everything changes about that experience. And I guess another aspect of this too is like I think that sometimes when people think of unschooling, they think of, oh, some kid just runs around and does whatever they want and has as much money as they want. And I think another way of thinking about it, and of course, everybody has a different approach. And so this is just how I think about it, is that you're starting from this foundation of a very loving relationship. And in a relationship, you need to ask the other person for things. Sometimes you need to say no to the other person. Like you wouldn't ever never say no to your partner, or never say I don't like it when you do that, or like I can't exist fully in the way I need to exist if you're doing that. And in the same way with your child, if you're contextualizing it as like we have a loving relationship, and if you throw a rock at that kid's face, I don't feel comfortable being in this space with you right now, and we're leaving. And that's still, and I think, that's kind of an extreme example, but I think one I give parents a lot is around like recording videos on the iPhone, because I've had a couple parents say, I don't know what to do because my kid won't edit their videos. They just want to film everything and they don't ever want to edit it. And the first thing I say is, are you paying for more iCloud storage? Because you can stop doing that. And then they are either going to have to edit their videos or not record any more videos. And almost 100% of the time, I find out they are paying for more iCloud storage. And so it's like, you can give freedom if you're in this loving space where you're taking care of your own needs and supporting your child in the way that they need to be supported given their developmental abilities.
Yeah, but I mean, I might come out wrong when I talked before about not managing, because obviously, in my mind, obviously unschoolers do interfere somehow,
Yes.
not just set
Yes.
the scene, but also interfere. I think some unschoolers can be slightly afraid of interfering, and some do it more. And I'm not being judgmental; it's just a spectrum. But I don't feel I manage. I just usually say I adjust, and I also use the word around the kids. So I say I'm going to adjust this situation.
I
Now my
love that.
kids are old adults,
I
half
love
of them. So, but still, and then often I ask for permission. Can I please adjust this situation? I feel there's a bad vibe, or I feel we need to talk about the ethics, or I feel we're overdoing this. So could we adjust? Because I feel this is not a bad thing. A, that you're doing is not, or we're doing is not a bad thing. But as we're doing it so much at the moment, B is suffering. So we're not doing B, and B is
yeah.
clearly suffering. So we need to do some more B. This is my adjustment. And I'm the adult, but I think, well, we are. Sometimes he's actually.
I'm kind of adult as well.
So but I think the reason that these adjustments work, that I get to do this, and sometimes it goes the way I was thinking, so we do more B, is because we have this relationship, and I'm not trying to manage their life, and I do not have a huge set goal of where they or we are going. And also, very often, they will tell me, some parents call it talk back. I'm happy we're having a communication. So they will say, we're doing a lot of A right now. We see that B is suffering, but right now A is very easy to do, and we have all the settings for it. So we can do a little bit of B, but we can do more B on Sunday when it's raining, because then we will have a lot of time. And they give me something I didn't think about, and then we adjust my adjustment. So it becomes this circle of everyone gets to say what they mean, which means they can adjust me basically. I don't like the word democratic. I think it's a
No, but
weird
it
word,
is
but it's
respectful dialogue.
leveled. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like I am this king of the universe and they are my little minions.
So beautiful. I mean, there's so many dimensions to what you're saying, and I feel like it's so refreshing to be having a conversation about the nuances of different educational philosophies and approach. And my heart really feels for anyone listening who might feel like this feels off to my approach or how I think about education, because the last thing I would ever want to do is say, like, this is the best way, this is the absolute way. And it's so exciting to be having a conversation where we can talk about approaches like adjustment or natural consequences or operating from a foundation of love and giving the other person their freedom. And someone else can say, oh, I have a slightly different approach. And then that approach informs my approach. And in this way, we have an education system that's constantly evolving through conversation and feedback, as opposed to traditional school, where nothing changes in 100 years because it has to go through this huge bureaucracy and so much limited time to actually build that relationship, that deep attachment that you've built with your child. I mean, that's what makes the best teacher in a traditional school, is someone who has a magical ability to build close relationships to 30 kids. That is something that not every parent can do.
Oh, that would be a unicorn.
When we grew up,
Every parent can do that with their own child, right? Every parent can have that foundational relationship, especially if there's not that divide between school and home, because that's something else. Is like you're constantly adjusting the way that you relate instead of having a fluid relationship like you described.
I also think maybe one of the reasons school systems fall apart is that they're not made with a space for that relationship to happen. I was in, I think, 5 different basic schools before I was 15. I think you were in the same.
Same all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The school system that we grew up with in Scandinavia some 40 years ago, it was designed to make, at least to create the option for this kind of relation to happen. So you had a main teacher, they would teach Danish, they would often also teach religion, sometimes even history. We have something we call the hour of the class, so we have 1 lesson every week just allocated for relations. And
as an example, I had they call it the class teacher. I had her from grade 1 till I left school, and she followed me through my whole development. And it was both strong, but also she was not my mom. So there's this difference, but the level, I think the teachers, the 3 main teachers I had, didn't change in 10 years. That was very secure. They knew who I was. I knew who they were.
so you grow the relationship.
Yeah.
There's the option of growing the relationship if that's how the school is designed. And in Scandinavia,
it was.
I don't know if it's still like that.
No,
it was like that. So you would very likely have the same main group of teachers for 10 years, which gives you and it's a big responsibility to say, yes, I'll be the main teacher of this new class starting, because you kind of promise your boss to stay for 10 years. It's a big deal to let go of that.
Nobody would do it
ask
today.
someone else to step in. And also, I have the impression that it's not the same in the US, but in Scandinavia, you have one base room where all the teaching happens. So it's a little bit more like a home. You don't move around. You're in the same physical space unless you're doing PE or physics or something that requires a different room, or the cooking classes that we also have. And I think this design is a better design. I'm still against schooling, basically, I admit it, but it's a better design than a school where the kids have to move around all the time. The teachers, they change every year because now you're in grade 5, so you have the grade 5 teacher, and it becomes very much about the grade and and the material you're studying, and not so much about the relation that is the root of the learning journey. So we could, if we wanted to, reform the school system, look a little bit at, I mean, it's an interesting conversation, the conversation between the experiences of the unschoolers and the homeschoolers and how the school system works. So if we shouldn't do what I sometimes say we should do, burn it down, then maybe we should learn from each other.
Yeah, have an evolution. I am sitting with these thoughts of on our podcast. We have had some wonderful people during the time. Gordon Neufeld, who I now have the pleasure of working together with, which is just a dream come true. Peter Gray, and recently my mind was blown by Sugata Mitra. And then we've talked with unschooling pioneers like Sandra Dodd, Sue Elvis, and all that road down there. And I am looking, so unschooling, radical unschooling, in combination with the thoughts from Gordon, and his thoughts about how connection is shaped and children grow up, with Sugata Mitras about how learning emerges in groups even more, and with the Peter Gray vibe of free play. I'm like, ooh, what will that be defined as? Because it's not pure unschooling, it's something else. I'm still looking for words to describe it, but there is an overlap where I'm just like, oh, I want to explore what this overlap is. Because I think for many people who start a homeschooling journey, many of the ones we have met during our now many years, they have started with having their kids in school, experiencing that is not a wonderful place for them to be. Like you said, your own experience of being a teacher was hard. For parents who have their kids in that system, some of them is like, this is not working, let's take our kids out. But then you often take them home to this world we now live in, where we have these nuclear families, where we are small units, where we don't have children playing at the street every day. We don't have the not necessity of the peer group, but who are you supposed to have free play with if people only have 2 kids per family? So there is this really valuable thing about the co-ops that Denmark was just not big enough for us to. It what we had. Yeah, okay. Let me rephrase that. Denmark has not had unschooling and homeschooling so long that we were lucky to be in Copenhagen, where there were other unschoolers. And when I went to work, Cecilia, most of Cecilia's time spent being there in the home with the family, and then going to social excursions with other homeschoolers in Copenhagen to meet up with all the others to create this.
One of the big jokes about homeschooling is that home is part of the word because you're never home.
Yeah.
We laughed about that a lot. You say you homeschool, but you're actually never in your home because you're always out and about at a museum or at grandmother's place, or meeting up with the other homeschoolers in the park, or going to whatever. So I think you're kind of a little bit wrong there.
I stand corrected.
I think that you're both right. For me, the essence of all of these philosophies and all of the people I've met does come back to this true community idea. How do we find true community, and how do we build true community? And I think that this natural urge for parents to provide, to learn, this natural urge to learn. I mean, for me, right now, we're on this podcast so we can learn, right? We're receptive, we're excited, we're asking questions, we're being challenged. I'm different now than I was 20 minutes ago. And so it's so sacred, learning. And for some reason, learning has to happen in community, and communities need each other to thrive. And because of so many different factors, there are fewer and fewer places that communities gather. You know, some of us don't go to church, you know, they're not into that. School is one place where people gather, but it's not ideal. And so there's a researcher I love, Daniel McFarland, who talks about network ecology of schools. And he found that schools that are smaller and unite around a shared value of education have lower rates of addiction than schools that are bigger and revolve around shared values of team sports. Now, I love sports. I think that's a great way to connect. But I feel like that when I read that study, I understood something very, very deep about my attraction to homeschooling, which is that you go to communities like San Francisco, the Hugs SF Unschoolers, or you see Brooklyn Apple Academy in New York City, or different directions, and you find these, or Cultural Roots Homeschool Co-op and in Virginia, and there are these communities that they have found it. They are parents and teachers and children of all ages who are sharing and who are together, and that, I think, is really what's extraordinary. And then I guess the other aspect of this, or when you talk about what unites all these people, is just how do you center education around the child and their needs and the family and their needs? Like, even there's so many ed tech companies that are building products for schools, because those are the people buying the products, and the products are so boring and painful for children to use. But how about a company like Toca Boca that is like watching children use their product, and they're building something really amazing for children? And then freedom comes in, right? Because you trust this child's desire to learn, you honor that, and then it all flows from there.
I think the misconception really is, it's twofold. One is that we try to plan the education of the children. And the other thing is that it's children, and we try to push the learning as young as possible. So if they start reading at 3, we can't get our arms down. And if they don't read at 8, we can't sleep at night. But really, does it matter? Does it matter?
No.
Does it really matter? It doesn't. And I think that's one problem. And the other is, the idea that it has to be all about education. If we really trust the process, learning is a byproduct of living. Learning is something that happens if you live a passionate life. You cannot help learning. That's why we're having fun here. We're not doing this podcast to promote our businesses. We're actually doing it because we like the conversation. And as a byproduct, we learn something. We get new thoughts, new ideas. And the same thing happens for children. Sugata Mitra has this very beautiful insight into how it happens in community, that it happens more in a natural way when more than one child is together. So a group of 2 or 3 or 4 children or adults, it actually has nothing to do with the age. Exploring, being curious, laughing, being tired, going for a walk, making some food, calling grandma, watching Netflix, whatever you do, if you're just slightly excited about doing it, it's because there's something there. Because otherwise it would be boring. And an interesting thing about humans is that we will do almost anything to not be bored. We hate being bored. Because being bored is learning nothing.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
impossible. And so I think this hyper focus on education, hyper focus of, it's like in factory, we try to shovel things in there in their brains instead of understanding that living life with a passion will put us in situations where we learn a lot, and we learn way more than if we have to look at some boring stuff we're not interested in and that we don't get why we have to learn it. So yeah, I'm ranting on and I forgot where I started.
I mean, what you say makes so much sense. I mean, it's a lot of this stuff is just really obvious. Like, if you explain to a child why they need to learn to read, it's going to make it much more motivating to learn how to read. And that's just so obvious. And so often we do not even take that basic step of understanding ourselves. It's just do it because you have to. That's it. I mean, that's so rudimentary. I wanted to go back to your question about community though, and having difficulty finding like-minded community, because when parents ask me, how do I even start homeschooling? The first thing I say is find a local homeschooling meetup and go. If a parent says, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I feel like I'm not doing a good job homeschooling, find a local meetup and go, because there is so much social pressure against homeschoolers and unschoolers. Like people in your family are telling you you're crazy because it's still counterculture. And so you need this community to say, oh, okay, this is what this person supports what I'm doing. At one point they were feeling overwhelmed and then they got over it. Or oh, that kid is older than my kid and they still don't know how to read. Oh, or this kid just got into Stanford and he learned how to read when he was 10, and you are interacting with these people who can share ideas and support and advice. And so that's just essential. And if you don't have that, you don't need to go to some fancy co-op. All you have to do is get a board game, post to your local group and say, I'm having a game night on my house at Thursday night. Anybody who wants to come over and play board games, come. You have a whole activity kids can do together. If you're shy, you can go off in the other room, not interact with anyone, because some people have social kids and they're not social, or the reverse. So board game is like the perfect. Other thing, unstructured park day. Go to your playground, post in your local group. We're hanging out at the playground on Thursdays. Anybody want to come? Come. And those two things, unstructured park day and board game night, are just win-win situation for building community with homeschoolers. That can be that simple. And, from there, you go through the stages of community. First of all, it's like, so happy, everybody loves each other. Oh, wait, now there are some things that we don't love so much about each other. Okay, are we going to work through this and become a real community, or are we just going to part ways? And then eventually you become to this ripe, juicy, beautiful thing that nourishes your whole life.
Or you find another community and join that, and they were all weirdos. It happens.
Right. It's okay.
Which is all right. I mean, it's also, I think I actually put a little highlight with the community word because I don't want to disencourage the newcomers. And if you think, oh, that's going to be really hard because I'm in a country where it's illegal to homeschool, or I'm in a country where there's so few homeschoolers, I can't find anyone, or my kids don't have the same age or religion or whatever, so that's going to be impossible, I'm going to give up. I think you can even start homeschooling without the community. Find an online community maybe where you as the adult can chat with someone, because you're going to need that. Take the kids out of school, see what happens. Very often there's a neighbor whose kids are in school, but they're good friends anyway. And maybe there's a church where there's embroidery nights every Tuesday, and it's mostly elderly women and some young women, and then your little 7-year-old, and they're having fun. So sometimes these communities don't have to revolve around the homeschooling. Lots of things can happen, and they usually do. I've seen it when people start home educating. So yeah, it doesn't all have to be this epic, group of friends of and homeschoolers that, happen to meet 3 times a week and you celebrate Christmas together.
No.
It doesn't have to be like that to be good.
It can change, it can evolve. I usually just tell people, give it a little time, because sometimes people will organize a play date. The kids don't have this magical hit it off romance, and it becomes almost like online dating. Come on, like it might take a month to kind of get things going, give it time to get to know people a little bit. But in general, I mean, pick your friends. Why not?
When you mentioned board gaming, it just occurred to me that it's one of the things we have enjoyed so much, both with other people, but also as we are full-time travelers. There are games where you don't need the language. If there's a language barrier, you can play. And I just wanted also to give a shout out to our dear friend Erika Davis Petre, who have a yearly game school conference where, I mean, it's a lot of homeschoolers meeting up once a year, just playing board games for a weekend, and it is epic.
We should go.
We should go. Yeah. We will go next year. Yeah.
And I also want to just add here. I mean, if anybody is listening, I keep talking to these listeners. I know,
Well,
but
I hope we have
anyone
some.
Yeah.
yes, if anyone is listening and says there's no homeschooling community near me, oh gosh, I wish I had a friend. I'd love to meet someone online. Just send me an email. I will hook you up, guaranteed.
Perfect.
So you're not alone.
But Manisha, it's also time because it has been a wonderful talk where we have explored a lot of really good subjects together. But for people out there who is like, oh, in the start, this talked about this project she has. Where do I find it? And what is it you offer? Not the 10-minute sales pitch, but just like for the people who are like, what is it? What is it when she said it's a marketplace? How is it she's connecting people? So if you can give a short introduction.
Sure. And thank you so much for inviting me to share. So my company is Modulo. You can find it at modulo.app, modulo.app. And if you can go to the site, you can search for curriculum, ask some, answer some questions about what activities your child enjoys. Do they have special needs? And we'll recommend a math and an English language arts and a full curriculum. We're adding on more subjects. And then we also have a directory of resources that has 18 different subjects. And so you can read reviews of different programs. We also have an online community. So there's the free community where you get all the content. I'm constantly producing videos. And then we have a paid membership where you can get a little bit more tailored support and talk to other parents. And, mostly it's very easy to go on Modulo and contact me directly at this point. And I'm just here to answer any question you have.
But how many tutors are involved? Is it you tutoring everyone?
Yeah, so I guess when you think about module, we have different modules. So we have tutors, clubs, curriculum. And so if you're looking for a tutor to fit your child's needs, we do have about 100 different vetted tutors. And we can, if there's a new subject that we don't have, we can find a tutor for you and we'll connect I think of them more as learning coaches. We'll connect them with a curriculum and a coach, and you can set up, recurring meetings with that tutor and get progress reports about how your child is learning. And by the way, both children and teachers fill out progress reports for each other after every single session. So it's really just driving their own learning.
Yeah.
Leveled.
No, but it's a wonderful way to learn from someone who is passionate about a thing. That is one of the things I love myself learning from someone more than from so book is wonderful. I love books, but if there is someone who is passionate about a subject, I just love listening to them. It is time. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed the talk. So thanks a lot for your time. It has been a pleasure exploring these subjects together with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, you really woke up my passion, and so apologies for all the shouting and talking over, but it was my favorite kind of conversation, and I feel like it's just the beginning. There's so many other topics I want to talk to you about, so I'm so happy that we know each other now.
Yeah, it's
Perfect.
great. It's great.